Okay.
Why don't you go ahead and give the welcome, Mary Day?
Okay, I was just looking at people coming in. Greetings, I'm Mary Day Kent. I'm with the United Nations Association of Greater Philadelphia. And we are just delighted that people have been able to join us this afternoon. Many of us back in November and December, when we were dealing with the beginnings of Omicron and holidays and so forth, there was also a very important gathering in Scotland, the United Nations UN conference on climate change in Glasgow, known as the Glasgow Summit. And this was the 26th annual conference of states parties to all of the agreements on climate change. And many of us are now starting to call it the climate catastrophe, not just climate change. And this event this afternoon is co-sponsored by several organizations sharing that concern: the United Nations Association of Greater Philadelphia, which also includes some of New Jersey and Delaware, and the Coalition for Peace Action, which is also on both sides of the river in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, Artists for Earth, and the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, and Physicians for Social Responsibility. So we will have several speakers and an opportunity for discussion at the end. And we hope that we are all going to be looking for handles for action at the global, the national, and the local level. And we're very grateful that people are joining us and we can all be working together. I'm going to turn this over to the Reverend Bob Moore for the facilitation introduction of our speakers. Bob is someone who has been working for 40 years on the local to global level. He was a founder of the Coalition for Peace Action, and since 2015, Global Peace Action has had a campaign called No Wars, No Warming to link the existential threats of nuclear war and climate catastrophe. So he is an ideal person to be facilitating our gathering this afternoon. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Mary Day. Well, first of all, thank you all for joining this event. We very much appreciate your presence, and we appreciate all of the co-sponsors that Mary Day just mentioned. And before I introduce our panelists, I wanted to just build a little bit on what Mary Day said about language, because I do think language is important in terms of how we use it to characterize the realities around us in this world. And when I first encountered the climate issue, we called it global warming. And then it started to be climate change. Then it became the climate crisis. And quite honestly, I think it's undeniable at this point that it has become the climate catastrophe. And we see that throughout the world, in wildfires all over the place, in extreme weather, tornadoes, cyclones, all kinds of things. So, we are at the front end of experiencing a climate catastrophe. And so it's with that in mind that I'm very pleased to introduce to you a wonderful panel this afternoon. There are three panelists, and let me just say before I introduce the first panelist, that after all three of our panelists have gone, well, maybe I'll introduce all three at the beginning, but after all three of them have done their presentations, while there, you can start submitting your questions. And that will be through the chat box. When you put your question into the chat box, it will be seen by the co-host, which is all of us that are speakers on this webinar. And we will then sort of wade through those and be ready for our question and answer period for 20 to 25 minutes at the end. So please, don't worry about whether you'll be able to remember your question. Just go ahead and put it into the chat box as it occurs to you, and we'll keep that in mind for the question and answer period. Our first speaker this afternoon is Maya van Rossum. She is the founder and executive director of the Delaware Riverkeeper Network. Yeah, there I am. They have protected the Delaware River Basin from the fracking pollution, which was a major threat. There's been some good success in that regard. And they are now working on the green amendments to state constitutions, which I think is a novel grassroots approach. And they, if I understood the bio correctly, they've already got the first such green amendment passed in the state of Pennsylvania. So let's hear now from Maya van Rossum.
Great, thank you for that very kind introduction. I was trying to do a last minute fix up on my PowerPoint because something didn't save yesterday. So we will go through it and it will be hopefully great. But if there's a little flub up, forgive me. So I'm going to just share my screen. Terrific. All the way to the beginning. Fantastic. So thank you very much for that kind introduction. I'm going to assume that you can see my screen because if you couldn't, you all wouldn't be able to follow me. So, so I really am here to talk about this new powerful pathway for environmental protection called Green Amendments for the Generations. And I've just had a lovely introduction, and I think really the most important things I want you to know about me in the context of this talk is to really know that I've been doing environmental advocacy and litigation for nearly 30 years now. Actually, that 27 is even dated. And I've been doing that for nearly 30 years now. And it is over the course of those 3 decades of work that I've come to experience, as so many of us have, how our current system of environmental protection laws is fundamentally failing us. And it is as a result of that experience, that recognition, and that work that I've come to found this new organization and this new movement called Green Amendments for the Generations, while I'm still the Delaware Riverkeeper at the same time. Yes, it's a lot of work, but it's all very worthwhile. So the Green Amendment movement is really about finding a new path for environmental protection here in the United States of America, in every single state, as well as at the federal level. And whenever I tell people that I'm here advocating for a new pathway of environmental protection, people very quickly, whether they're longtime environmental advocates, the opposition, industry, government, or whomever, inevitably, there are many people in the audience who immediately think, well, gosh, Maya, we have already have like hundreds and thousands of environmental protection laws, of regulations, of policies, of programs, of agencies that are all supposed to be dedicated to environmental protection. So why is it that you say that there is room or space for something more legally? Why do you say that we need a new legal path for environmental protection when we already have so much going on? How can there possibly be space for something new? Well, the problem is, I don't care what state you're in, across our nation here in the United States, in this current system of laws, we really accept pollution and degradation as a necessary evil, as a foregone conclusion, something to be considered at the end of the decision-making process, when really all that's left to be thought about is what permits are we going to issue that are going to manage the who, the when, the where, the pollution and degradation that we have already accepted as a foregone conclusion is going to happen, right? I mean, there's really this sense that industry actually has a right to pollute. And so we just need to figure out how to manage it and very literally legalize it through permitting. Under this current system of laws, right, the focus is not on prevention of pollution, prevention of degradation. That's not where the legal process starts. In addition, all too often, even if we do have decently crafted laws on the books that will make an important difference, there's poor implementation, or there are rollbacks as soon as somebody gets into political power who doesn't appreciate the importance of environmental protection. There are a lot of gaps in the law. There are a lot of things that aren't addressed or aren't addressed until it's too late. And under this current system of laws, environmental racism is very much baked in with communities of color, indigenous communities, immigrant and low-income communities, not disproportionately impacted for highly polluting industrial operations, not unfairly targeted for environmental degradation in spite of this system of laws we have in place, but it really happens because of those laws, because of how they're written, because of how they're implemented, and because of how they legalize in really fundamental systemic ways the disproportionate impacting of BIPOC communities. And so as a result of this system of laws, we have communities across our nation that are drinking contaminated water, breathing contaminated air, species of all kinds that are being harmed. And of course, we are truly facing climate catastrophe. And so we can see by the reality of what is happening on the ground. We don't even have to understand how the laws here in the US work. We can just look at what is actually happening to people, to communities, to environments, to understand, to recognize that something is missing, something fundamentally important is missing from this current system of laws. So what is that? Well, I think a very important something missing is the fact that we do not recognize in a meaningful, enforceable way the rights of people to clean water, clean air, a stable climate, and healthy environments. We recognize all sorts of other fundamental rights in the Bill of Rights section of our state and federal constitutions, things like the right to free speech, freedom of religion, right? The private property rights, due process rights, the right to bear arms is given highest constitutional recognition and protection, but the fundamental rights of the people to a clean and healthy environment are not. No matter how many times we hear it said, we have a right to clean water, we have a right to clean air, recent international statements, everybody has this right to a clean and healthy environment. Here in the US, no, you don't. If you can't enforce it in a court of law, you may have those rights in your heart. You may have those rights in your mind. They may be beautiful words that come out of your mouth, but you don't actually have the right to a clean and healthy environment. And so that's what the Green Amendment movement is all about. It is about, in a meaningful, enforceable way, raising up environmental rights so they are given that highest constitutional recognition and protection that you can have here in the United States of America. Now, if you want to accomplish this raising up of environmental rights, not just any language that sounds pretty will do. There are really critically important elements essential to have a successful, meaningful environmental right here in the US. And we know that because the fact of the matter is almost every single state in the nation talks about the environment in their constitutions, some of them very powerfully declaring it in some way, shape, or form or another as being a right of the people. But there really are only 3 states, that is Pennsylvania, New York, and Montana, that accomplish this highest constitutional standing and protection for environmental rights, with New York actually being the most recent addition to our Green Amendment family. New York, we secured passage of a constitutional Green Amendment just this past November. So we're looking forward to seeing advancements in the state of New York when it comes to environmental rights. So what is it that you need if you want to have highest constitutional recognition of environmental rights? Well, you need whatever language you're placing, and it needs to be the right language. It needs to be in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution. That's where we place all of the other fundamental rights we hold dear. That's where we must place our environmental rights. Currently, states that talk about the right to a clean and healthy environment, they often put it in the miscellaneous section of their constitution or somewhere else further down, but it is not in the same place or space where those other fundamental rights are placed. And the truth is that Bill of Rights placement is not just visually pleasing, right? It's not just aspirational. It actually brings profound, important, meaningful opportunities and interpretations that make a difference legally in the language and in the right. We must be clear that we really are talking about the rights of all the people, and that we are talking about the essentials of life, like water, like air, like a stable climate. Very often, states that are talking about the environment are talking about things like the right to fish, hunt, and trap. They may be valued and they may be important, but they are fundamentally different writ large, you know, unless you're talking about indigenous communities that are maybe reliant upon hunting. But for the most of us, that's fundamentally different than the right to clean water and clean air. The language should be generational. We should be looking to protect future generations. And the language should be what we call in the law self-executing, meaning that it has legal force and effect in its own right. You don't have to turn and find a law to give you, we, the people, the right to clean water, clean air, and a stable climate. If we need to enforce our constitutional right, we can turn directly to the constitutional language if there is no existing legislation that helps us. And it has to apply to all government officials, not just the legislature. We want the local town council, the state legislature, the governor's office. When we get a green amendment, we want it to be the Congress, the president, the environmental agencies. Everybody has to be subject to the constitutional obligation. And we want to be clear that we're not just talking, right, about the individual rights of the people, but we're talking about the responsibility of government officials to protect our environmental rights and to protect our natural resources, including being as explicit as possible in the modern era about climate being amongst those resources. Now, our Green Amendment movement, our effort to secure these highest constitutional protections through what I call the passage of green amendments. Remember, be very clear. You might read in the news about there's a green amendment here, green amendment there. People are throwing the term around all over the place now. That it is not any language in the Constitution. I defined the Green Amendment in 2017 in my book, okay? It is a specific thing that fulfills the specific criteria I just laid out for you, plus a few more. So don't let anybody just say anything sounds good or mention any other state other than Pennsylvania, Montana, or New York. That's where we have green amendments, not yet anywhere else. But our goal is to get constitutional green amendments in every single state across our nation. And then ultimately, when we reach the correct tipping point, when the time is right, to get a green amendment at the federal level. Because there's tremendous power in protecting the environment at the state level and at the federal level. And we need government officials at both levels of government to be held accountable to protecting our environmental rights. At this point, we have inspired Green Amendment proposals, not just the passage in New York State most recently, but we've inspired Green Amendment proposals in a dozen other states. And some of these states are critically important when it comes to the climate crisis. They are on the leading edge of where the fossil fuel industry is advancing or where the ravages of the climate crisis are being experienced. So it's really important. These are some really important states to be on the front lines of the Green Amendment movement. But of course, we need many, many more. We need all the states on board. Now, what would it mean to have a green amendment? What does it mean sort of writ large when we get it? It's very, again, I don't want this to just be beautiful language because, oh yeah, I have a right. It actually means something different than just pretty words. It does mean that our environmental rights are protected as powerfully as those other fundamental rights we hold dear. We all know how powerfully the right to free speech, private property rights are protected and defended because they are in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution. We all know that when there is a threat to the right to bear arms for communities who believe so passionately in that right, we all know how powerfully they are heard, how powerfully their rights to bear arms to private properties, how powerfully they're protected in the courts, in the halls of government, and in the hearts of the advocates, because they were recognized and protected in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution. That same incredible power now comes to bear for the environment. It means that when people are talking about private property rights, which so often private property rights industry and others come forth, it's my property right, you know, if you regulate this, if you limit what I can do on my property, this is a constitutional taking. And the problem is when those threats and arguments come forth from developers in industry who want to advance something that shouldn't be advanced, there's no counterweight because the environment's not up there. The environment, property rights are up here and the environment's somewhere down here. Well, when we bring it up into the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution, they are now on par with one another. So environmental rights can be used as a powerful pushback for the indiscriminate use and argument of gun rights or property rights. It means that constitutionally government is refocused on prevention of harm first. Whatever it is they're doing, legislating, regulating, permitting, decision-making, they now must reorient themselves. So they are thinking about the environment up front and thinking up front about how can I ensure that whatever I'm doing as a government official will not result in the infringement of the environmental rights of the people, whether it's through direct government action or through the action of third parties, such as industry through permitting. It does mean that there is generational protection that must be constitutionally recognized and ensured. And so that is right, that's a much longer time horizon when you're engaged in government decision-making, and of course is critically important when we're talking about issues having to do with the climate. And including language in a constitutional green amendment that says that we are recognizing and protecting the rights of present and future generations is not, again, just pretty language. We've actually gotten court decisions that make very, very clear that this language has tremendous strength and enforceability, and that government officials must truly protect the environmental rights of future generations. Environmental justice is incredibly strengthened because now all people, regardless of race, ethnicity, socioeconomics, we all have the same constitutional right to a clean and healthy environment. And all government officials must protect the environmental rights of all the people equitably. Sacrifice zones are unconstitutional. The green amendments are incredibly important for strengthening our efforts to deal with the climate crisis. Not all green amendments specifically you include the term climate or the right to a stable climate in their language. Nonetheless, all green amendments will provide tremendous strength when it comes to the climate, because climate crisis impacts our water, our air, our flora, our fauna, right? Our healthy lives. And so however it is the language gets framed and put forth, it will give us strength in terms of the climate crisis, particularly when paired with that generational language. And it does for those, you know, for those of us who care so deeply about our plant and animal friends, it gives us additional strength to protect them. The Green Amendment will strengthen the way existing laws are interpreted and advanced. It will provide powerful foundation for critically needed new protections, better decisions, and it will fill the gaps in the law where they exist. One of the reasons why PFAS contamination has been allowed to proliferate throughout our environment was because of a failure of government to put forth legislation and regulations that would prevent the use and the proliferation of that man-made family of toxic chemicals in ways that bring it into the environment and into our bodies. Well, if there are green amendments in place where you have a gap like that, people can now turn to their right to clean water and clean air to ensure government action to protect them. And it provides a powerful tool for us, we the people, to take on industry. Because now we have literally taken our power back and made clear that our environmental rights are a priority. They are true rights. Industry does not have a right to pollute, but we the people have a right to clean water, clean air, and a stable climate. Our goal of a green amendment is to make sure our government officials do it better in the first place. But the reality of a green amendment is when our government officials fail us, we can get access to the courts to enforce protection of our environmental rights. I mean, we are literally facing a climate crisis, and we need something more powerful than what we have. Constitutional green amendments literally are we the people taking our power back when it comes to the environment, because through our Constitution, we are telling our government officials that when we give them permission to govern over us, there are limitations on that governance. And amongst those limitations are all of the rights enumerated in the Bill of Rights section of our Constitution. Now we are adding to that our environmental rights. This is what Pennsylvania's Green Amendment says, that the people have a right to clean air, pure water, the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. It makes these rights generational, and it mandates that government officials protect the natural resources of the state for the benefit of all the people. Now, some people wonder, well, Maya, how powerfully can that kind of language be? Because after all, Pennsylvania is being ravaged by fracking. So how powerful can it be? Well, I want to assure you that it can be powerful. It is powerful, and it's growing in power. One of the things that happened in Pennsylvania is that while its Green Amendment was added to the Constitution in 1971, there were some really just stupid claims that were based upon it in those early cases. A notable one being that the government tried to use the constitutional right to pure water and clean air to protect the Gettysburg battlefield from an educational viewing tower that was going to be constructed off-site. And long story short, in the course of rendering its decision, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court declared the Pennsylvania Green Amendment to be just a statement of policy and to not have the same legal strength as all of the other fundamental rights in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution. And as the the Chief Justice at the time said, that case literally disemboweled the Environmental Rights Amendment. And it disemboweled it by declaring it to be a statement of policy. And that precedent stayed in place for 42 years. And it was during that 42 years that shale gas extraction, with all of its highly polluting industrial operations, came to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, right? Contaminating our air and our water, transforming our landscapes, spewing pollution into our streams, our rivers, our groundwater supplies, even people's drinking water, spewing pollution, including climate changing methane emissions, into the air, and resulting in the proliferation of massive infrastructure like pipelines and compressor stations and LNG export facilities. And even though fracking was already proliferating in Pennsylvania, right? And during this time, as a result of the way the law was, communities were being overwhelmed. But the frackers and their friends in the legislature wanted to find a way to allow them to be able to proliferate even more. And so they wrote a very pro-fracking law known as Act 13, which did a lot of things. But long story short, it was a gift basket to the industry that was going to allow them to proliferate in every part of every community in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and be held, if it's even possible, less accountable than they already were being held. And so while Pennsylvania communities and environments were already being overwhelmed by the industry, things were going to get dramatically worse if Act 13 was allowed to stand. Thing is, when you have a law that's passed by the legislature and signed by the governor, you don't have very many options, right? You can protest, you can try to get the law repealed, which wasn't going to happen because they had just passed it. You can accept it and move on, right? Well, that's not gonna work. You can try to elect better people to office, but that comes too late. But what you really need in a situation like that is you need a higher power to hold government accountable for their bad acts. And we at the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, and I as the Delaware Riverkeeper, along with our attorney, Jordan Yeager, realized that we had a higher power in that long ignored constitutional environmental rights amendment. And so we teamed up with 7 towns to challenge provisions of Act 13, claiming that they would violate the environmental rights of the people of Pennsylvania. The case went all the way up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And in December of 2013, we got an opinion out of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court that said that by any responsible account, the exploitation of the Marcellus Shale Formation will produce a detrimental effect on the environment, on the people, their children, and future generations. That the resources that were being harmed were resources essential to life, to health, and to liberty, and that as a result, the provisions of Act 13 that we were challenging would in fact violate the environmental rights of the people of Pennsylvania. And so in that victory, we not only defeated some of the most devastating aspects of Act 13 and prevented that mass proliferation of the fracking industry and all of its devastating consequences, but we literally breathed legal life into that long ignored environmental rights amendment. And that was the founding of the Green Amendment movement. It was after that victory that I had my epiphany that there was something special about what Pennsylvania had. And I identified what it was. I laid them out. I called it a Green Amendment. And we started this massive nationwide movement to try to get these amendments passed, to protect our water, to protect our air, to protect our flora and fauna, and to protect our climate for present and future generations. So with that, I think I've just come to the end of my time. Perfect. But I just want you to know, in Pennsylvania, since we achieved that victory, there have been many, many more opportunities building on the precedent that an environmental right really makes a difference in so many contexts and prevents government from abusing us and abusing our environmental rights either directly or through the acts of others, such as industry. And it can, and it should, and it will make a difference when it comes to dealing with the climate crisis, if we can get these amendments passed quickly now and into effect. So I thank you for the opportunity to share. I hope that flow went okay, despite my last minute problems. And I hope you'll get involved at www.forthegenerations.org and get involved with the movement in your state.
Thank you so much, Maya. That was an outstanding presentation, if I may say so. And we do have a couple questions in our chat box already, but we're going to save those for the Q&A period. So again, I thought that was really clear and passionate and intellectually very solid. So thank you so much for that very strong start to our panel. Our next panelist is going to be Ed Aguilar. Ed is the Pennsylvania director of the Coalition for Peace Action, based in Philadelphia, and he chairs the No Wars, No Warming campaign under the Coalition for Peace Action's umbrella. He's going to be speaking on opportunities for progress toward the next climate summit in November of 2022 in Egypt, as well as the Civilian Climate Corps. Ed.
Thank you, Bob. Let me try to get this PowerPoint up on the screen. Let me know if it's appearing. Did that appear? No? Okay.
It goes to a.
I went to the share. I went to the share button.
You've got it. Looks like you. There it is. Now it is there. Now it's there.
Okay. Now I can't see it.
Somebody's at the Perry World House.
That's not his. Ed, go
That's
back to your screen that you just had and you can click on it from there, or you have it open at the bottom. I see. There it is. Yep.
Ah, here we go.
Well, that's
Okay.
Yeah. But that's
And-
the notes page.
If you come down to presentation at the bottom in the right, looks like a little.
Presentation. 1 second. 1 second. Let me try this. Let me try this again. I have to get back on. I'm screen sharing. Here is the document.
There we go.
Okay, now we see it. All right, so this is a campaign we started in 2015 by the Coalition for Peace Action, of which Bob is executive director. As you mentioned, I run the Philadelphia office, and the whole idea was we had the Paris climate talks in 2015, And we wanted to make sure that at the Democratic National Convention, which was, of course, in 2016, coming up for the presidential election, that there would be a strong plank, a strong platform on the climate crisis, because we've known for many years the climate crisis is not new. Bob likes to say now, or feels we have to say, I think it's true, that it's reaching the point of a climate catastrophe. So that was the whole goal, and we started in 2015. By 2016, at the time of the July Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia, we had a demonstration of 14,000 people, probably the largest for some years in Philadelphia, at the convention, demonstrating for a strong climate platform. So that was the beginning. So we're going to go back to more things we've done, but in the meantime, let's fast forward to the G20 that happened in October actually, in Rome. And here are the 20 statesmen, prime ministers, presidents. You see Joe Biden over on the far left. That's not a political characterization. He should probably be in the middle if that was the case. We had all of the G20 is the top 20 economic powers in the world. So we had 7 from the EU, Canada and the US from North America. We had Japan, we had Turkey, South Africa, Brazil, many others. MBS was there from Saudi Arabia, as you see. Interestingly enough, though, the Chinese president, Xi, did not appear. Instead, he met on the side, the foreign minister, Wang Yi, met on the side of the conference with Secretary of State Tony Blinken. So there was a distinctly low profile Chinese participation. Putin did not attend at all for Russia. He did also send his foreign minister. And this, to me, unfortunately, was a sign that neither Russia nor China wanted to give a high profile to this conference or make strong commitments. And unfortunately, that turned out to be the case. In the meantime, we had many people. This is in Glasgow. You see the earth is burning. There were 6 million people around the world demonstrating in favor of a stronger climate program at the UN conference. This was actually the 26th Conference of the Parties, they're called. That's what's called COP26 for short. And that was Glasgow, Scotland, as you know. And people were saying, act now, the world is burning. Manisha will tell us more about the effects of all this on the global south. Many of the countries that are island countries or poorer countries, developing countries, are in the global south, as you know. And she'll get into more details of how can we help on that front. But going back to the No Wars, No Warming campaign, this was another event that we did on Earth Day. This was 2020, was the 50th anniversary of the Earth Day event. Okay, every year there's an Earth Day, and the UN Association of Greater Philadelphia worked with us at Coalition for Peace Action. We were fortunate to have with us also people from Voices for Impact and Danielle Allura. This is Miss Pennsylvania, I should say Ms. Pennsylvania. Danielle is someone who is a passionate climate advocate. The Miss Pennsylvania contest was part of the Miss Earth competition. which interestingly enough is co-sponsored by the United Nations Environmental Program. That is the only event of that type that the UN sponsors. And part of the theme of it is that each contestant has to have a project, an environmental project. And so Danielle's was called No Excuse for Single-Use Plastic. You can find it on Facebook at hashtag No Excuse for Single Use. And she has done a lot with this program in Pennsylvania and around the country, especially with hotels and other big users of plastic. She has really actually gotten hundreds of hotels to stop using those little plastic bottles that were then thrown out and fill our landfills. So that's Danielle. She was a major part of that. She's a member of the UN Association and has continued to work with us and lead young people on these issues. Then also, we had a live event when the pandemic seemed to be dying down in May of 2021. I want to give a shout out to Miranda Alexander. Miranda is also on our board of the UN Association, but she is, in addition to that, and she does a lot of different things, she is a leader of the Caribbean Community of Philadelphia organization. And she's done a lot with that. Maybe on the chat, she can tell us more about it, or in the question period. She hosted this, and again, we worked with her, CFPA and the UN Association. We went to the Cherry Street Pier, which was a good venue because it's open. It looks like a kind of airplane hangar. It's open. It's right by the dock, as you can guess from the name, at the end of Cherry Street Pier on the Delaware. So it was a wonderful venue for an event about this sort of thing. And actually, some of us went to dinner on the pier afterwards. We also had Pam Lazos, who is with both the Global Water Alliance, that's another allied group of ours, and with the EPA. She is a leader in the EPA Region 3, which is the region for this area. And I was on the platform as well. And we talked about the effects on Haiti and the Caribbean of the climate crisis. And the theme was save the people and the land in the Caribbean from the climate crisis and deadly plastics, clogging the oceans, as well as earthquakes. The other thing we did, and I'm sorry I came in a little bit late. I don't know if Maya has mentioned it. We worked with Maya and Tracy Carluccio of the Delaware Riverkeeper Network to save the Delaware from the toxic LNG shipping. And we can talk more about that later if you want. But basically, there were two issues. One is stop fracking in the Delaware River Basin. That was a success. The Delaware River Basin Commission met a month later, and in response to many public comments, they ended fracking, outlawed fracking on the Delaware River. And the Delaware River, we need to remember, provides clean water for 16 million people, all the way from its headwaters in New York State, upper New York State, all the way down to Delaware and New Jersey and Pennsylvania in the Delaware Bay. So not only is the Delaware a source of, enjoyment, boating, tourism, but it is vital for our clean water. And there are endangered species in Delaware Bay because there's so much toxic waste that has been dumped in the past. So we need to stop that. And we need to stop, we still need to stop, because that is still on the table, a project called the Fortress LNG Terminal in Gibbstown, New Jersey. Again, we can discuss this more as well, but it is crucial for this country, but also for the importing countries. The idea of this terminal is to export liquid natural gas, which of course is toxic and is an environmental pollutant, which adds to global warming. This is not a good thing to be exporting. We need to be cutting that down, not building it up. And so this will, if we stop this terminal, that will help not only the people of our area, but people in Puerto Rico, and Ireland is the other designated place for the LNG to be exported. Now, next steps for a green economy. We could talk for a long time just on this question of, what are the next steps for a clean economy? But let me just say, we have worked together with a group in Massachusetts called nuclearban.us, and they have pointed out, and we have joined them. I don't know if I can get this focus better so you can see. Can you see the whole map of the US there? I think we're missing the part of it on the right. Patricia, I guess there's no way to.
You can see it.
Oh, you can see it, okay.
Yeah.
And so you see right there, just these yellow bubbles are jobs in solar energy. And Pennsylvania alone could gain 122,000 jobs by this estimate in building up potential solar energy use in our area. And these other bubbles are different things like wind energy, which is, I believe, these kind of purple bubbles, and geothermal and tidewater, and there's many different kinds of clean energy that can be developed. Electric vehicles, of course, are another thing that auto workers need jobs in this country. They've been declining. And electric vehicles, which is part of the Biden agenda, will increase jobs again for auto workers. And then finally, a new civilian climate corps will make a tremendous difference if we implement it fully for American youth. Now you see on the right, this is part of a pilot program in California. And these are young people who have gotten good paying jobs, $15 an hour or more, restoring forests and the environment in California. Well, the idea over here, if you look at, here's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at an event. I'll just point out because, people think of, socialism, right? But it isn't just the left that supports this. The majority of the American people, when the issues are described to them in surveys, 2/3, by and large, 2/3 of the American people support things like, a civilian climate corps, support clean energy, support moving forward on this. Just a couple of things about this program, though. So you see over here, here is AOC. Here's Joe Neguse, who was one of the chairs of the impeachment committee, Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut, and Senator Coons. I want to mention Senator Coons particularly because he's from Delaware, Joe Biden's home state, and he may be Biden's best friend in the Senate and someone who will be very influential in this. So this is kind of an across the board. By the way, even Joe Manchin supports this climate accord. So there are solutions. There are things that can be done. Sometimes people think, oh, you know, it has been defeated. It has not been defeated. Now, in fact, is the time that we really have to, you know, step up on these issues, because pending right now in the Senate is, you know, President Biden has said we're going to have to reassess and realign and do things in chunks, as he put it. So partial progress on different issues. But one thing that all of these people seem to agree on, and again, Ed Markey said yesterday or Friday on MSNBC, he was quoted as saying, and Ro Khanna was there also, one of the leaders of the Progressive Caucus. But Ed Markey from Massachusetts was quoted as saying he believes that we can still get over $500 billion for the climate crisis program. And I'll leave it on that optimistic note. I think whether we actually get that much will depend a lot on what civil society and we all do in the coming months. So I'll leave it at that. And thanks. I'll be happy to answer any questions at the chat.
All right, thanks very much, Ed. That was certainly an excellent overview of some important opportunities and the history of this No Wars, No Warming campaign. Now, our third and final panelist before our question and answer period is Manisha Patel. She's the immediate past president of the United Nations Association of Greater Philadelphia. She's going to be speaking on the climate effects in the global south and also a follow-up to the Glasgow Summit, including the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. Manisha.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. This is, just be patient. This is not a natural side for me to give presentations and talk. I love to work though. But anyway, I'm excited to talk to you about the South Asia, and give you a South Asia picture. In 2021, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, released a major report with troubling forecasts for South Asia, predicting hot weather, longer monsoons, rising sea levels, flooding in coastal areas of Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, landlocked Afghanistan, Bhutan, and Nepal. Also will see rising temperatures, droughts, and glacial melts. And the island nation of Maldives could be submerged in the not so distant future. The region's climate may pose also a security risk. A 2018 World Bank study projected 40 million climate migrants in South Asia by 2050. Global warming poses a threat to food security, hobbles economic growth, prompts political instability. So this past year's United Nations Climate Conference, COP26, a UN-facilitated effort to stave off looming climate emergency, led to a flurry of activity. In early part of the year, 101 Nobel laureates, including Dalai Lama, called climate crisis a moral issue of our time and urged governments around the world to sign the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty to end expansion of oil, gas, and coal, and invest in renewable energy to avert climate crisis. We need to rethink energy use in industry, transport, buildings, direct industrial processes, waste, agriculture, forestry, and land use. At COP26, Asian nations, major emitters, made several commitments. Indonesia agreed to halt and reverse forest loss and land degradation, reduce methane emissions, and to end use of coal. Vietnam signed coal phase out and reversing of forest loss and more sustainable agriculture. Philippines pledged to scale up clean power generation and sustainable agriculture and halt and reverse forest loss. Both Pakistan and Bangladesh canceled all coal plants that were currently under construction, and a commitment to build no new plants and to also ban use of imported coal. India announced a net zero target of 2070. It pledged to meet 50% of energy needs from renewables and reduction of carbon intensity and accelerate green technology and sustainable agriculture. It also committed to adoption of zero emission vehicles. One positive in India is that the use of renewables is increasing. The subsidies that the government provides is becoming a good incentive for change. All this is good, but this is still insufficient, as major emitters are still reliant on coal. The only positive development is that for the first time, a phase down of coal and a phase out of fossil fuel got mentioned. So what is happening on the ground? Individuals and nonprofits are continuing to work to improve lives of women, salt farmers. National Defense Council helped, the National Defense Council helped salt farmers, especially the women farmers, in helping replace diesel pumps with solar pumps, and developed a first green bank, a public financial institution to attract new capital to grow market for clean energy. Environment activism is also here to stay. In urban areas, in major cities, residents are rallying against widespread destruction of trees. We need a lot more of Louise Gibbs, who organized her community to speak out against chemical waste. We need Wangari Maathai, who spearheaded Kenya's Green Belt movement. And we need Sarah James, Norma Kasi, and Jonathan Solomon, who used grassroots campaigns to protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in Alaska. In our own local United Nations chapter, last year we had two bright young leaders. One, Ahmed Masalhi, a student at Jefferson University, who was visiting from Egypt for a year, and in Egypt had developed a landfill around Nile into a park. He inspired street children to design it and used only recyclable materials to create this beautiful space that everybody can use. At Jefferson last year, he invented a portable air conditioning system and presented it in his thesis using technology, sustainable technology. And during his time here in the United States, he planted numerous trees and worked with us on a project inspiring young children to plant trees and become environmentally conscious. Another bright spot, as you know, was Danielle Allura. We are very proud of Danielle and her work. Ed Aguilar mentioned her. She advocated and educated all through the year and still continues her work. She urged the hotel industry to end single-use plastic use. And about more than 50 or 50 local Pennsylvania hotel owners pledged to end the use. So I think we have to continue our work and give some opportunity, get involved ourselves in every way we can, and support other nonprofits that are doing work. Do our share of calling politicians to keep us in the right track. Thank you.
Thank you, Manisha. Yes, let's show our appreciation to Manisha and to all the panelists. Those of you who have your cameras on, let's clap our hands. I thought all those were excellent presentations, and we are on track in terms of our time frame. And so we have a good 20 to 25 minutes for question and answer. So keep sending them in, but we're going to go ahead and launch right in with our first one, which is going to be read by the Coalition for Peace Action Assistant Director, Patricia Hall. Patricia.
Good afternoon. The first question is for Maya, and this is from Marta Steele. In New York, I think you said it was Montana. I'm sorry if I wrote the wrong state, in Pennsylvania, the 3 states that you referred to. Are the amendments just at state level or farther down as well?
Great question. So the way, in order to be a green amendment, you have to apply to all levels of government. If you don't do that, if you simply limit the obligation to the state legislature, for example, then it doesn't fulfill the definition of a green amendment, and you don't get my support, you get my opposition. So that's a long way of saying that, yes, they do absolutely in all 3 states apply at the local level, at the county level, at the state level, all the way up in all the regulatory agencies. And that is because of the way the Constitution operates. So all of those entities get their authority from the state and from the Constitution. All of them have an obligation to uphold the Constitution in their governance. And the language in those 3 amendments does not specifically limit it to one branch or arm of government. Therefore, it applies to all. That being said, one of the things that I explicitly do in the current green amendments that are advancing, there are a number of things that I recommend that sort of learn the lessons from the past, particularly from Pennsylvania and Montana. And one of them is to say that if our partners in those states are willing, that to make clear that they should be very clear, specific, that it applies to all branches of government. And so what we say is of state government. And so what we say is things like the state and all its political subdivisions. And so we just try to be more clear and explicit about it. But even if it doesn't have that language, as long as it's not limited just to the legislature, then it should apply throughout.
Thank you, Maya. Our next, oh, do you have them in front of you, Patricia?
Yes, I have another question for Maya.
Okay.
Okay. This is from Kip. Question for Maya. I support the Green Amendment, but I am concerned that we also stay focused on legislation that will directly reduce greenhouse gases. What is your strategy on this?
So 2 things. So of course, they're not mutually exclusive. If we are going to address all of the challenges that we face, whether it's climate, environment, environmental justice, or otherwise, we do have to the degree we can, broaden our scope and our focus. Passage of a green amendment by definition will help in addressing the climate crisis when it gets passed. So because even if you don't have specific climate legislation, if your green amendment, particularly if it specifically mentions the climate, actually becomes a legal authority and tool that you can grab onto in your advocacy, and if necessary in litigation, to force appropriate government activity and action, or to prevent when government is doing bad things that will advance the climate crisis. So that's sort of one thing. On the other hand, I would never suggest to somebody, if you have a really good piece of legislation or regulation that you think has a chance of passing in the near term that you really believe in and will really help, I would never dissuade you from being actively engaged on that. If you can be engaged on both, that's fantastic. If you have to pick one or the other due to your own personal time limitations, I respect that, and I would respect whatever your choice was.
Thank you. So I'm going to actually jump in with the next question because I'm not sure if it also went to you, Patricia, and it is, would the Green Amendment stop things like pipelines if citizens sued the state or company?
So pipelines, it's going to depend on what type. As with everything with the Green Amendment, in the early years, it depends on context and setting good precedent. So you're not going to be able to bring a Green Amendment challenge in it, where we already have pipelines advancing and sort of have them all wiped off the face. On the other hand, you may be able to use a Green Amendment in certain contexts for certain kinds of pipelines in a really meaningful way. That is still being demonstrated and explored. But there are different kinds of pipelines. So for example, an interstate natural gas pipeline, a pipeline passing from one state to another that carries natural gas, not natural gas liquids, natural gas, that is subject to the Natural Gas Act and the authority of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. For that kind of pipeline, there is a very thin slice of opportunity for the states in that the Federal Natural Gas Act supports the application of the Federal Clean Water Act, which supports states putting in place state water quality standards and then applying them to those kinds of pipelines. And so in that sliver, there may be an opportunity there. We're still exploring that. I believe there is opportunity there, but we're still exploring that. When you're talking about a different kind of pipeline, a liquids pipeline, then the state has more authority. And the other kind of pipeline, the Natural Gas Act preempts all state and local authority except that sliver. In liquids lines, the states do have more authority. Our Green Amendment in Pennsylvania is several years old, but still relatively young when it comes to precedent and fully appreciating and understanding how it applies in different contexts. So we're trying to figure it out. The Attorney General did cite the Pennsylvania Green Amendment when putting in place enforcement actions on the Mariner East pipeline, but that was for violations that are already happened. So the damage was already done. One of the reasons why we couldn't explore the total strength of the Green Amendment in the Mariner context, I believe, was because the Mariner project was put forth for permitting very early after our Act 13 victory and before that victory got fully solidified by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court in a legal decision that came 2 years later. So that's all to say that I believe it should be powerful. I believe it should be important. I believe it should help. But our Green Amendment movement is young and early, including in Pennsylvania. And so we are working hard to set those good precedents to ensure that that's the case. But it's going to be like a case by case, and it wouldn't be it wouldn't be writ large across pipelines. You're going to have to identify a specific pipeline, specific government action, and then we're going to have to bring that challenge, set that strong precedent, right, and then build upon it over time.
Thank you, Maya. We do have some more excellent questions, and they keep coming in, which is excellent. I think we do still intend to finish by 3:30, so. But I think this will be a very lively question and answer. The next one is for you, Ed, and it's a question on asking you to expand on how the climate catastrophe and the nuclear danger are related to each other. How are they interrelated?
That's a very important question. As far as I'm concerned, and I think many of us in Coalition for Peace Action, we consider the climate crisis and the existence of nuclear weapons on the Earth as twin existential threats to humankind. Okay, the nuclear threat has been around, as you know, since Hiroshima in 1945 in Nagasaki. The climate crisis has actually also been around, but people were not quite as aware that early on about them. But both of them need to be resolved if, in my opinion, if the human race is going to survive and flourish, as well as many animal species that are threatened by these crises, it has to be done. It's not a question of, maybe, or what can we do to just reduce it. We have to end the threats because they are existential. And so, for example, just one example, the Pentagon has a carbon footprint that is larger than all but 8 nations in the world. Let me just repeat that, larger than all but 8 nations in the world. It produces more pollution than the nation of Italy or Portugal, entire nations. And we just can't go on in this fashion. So we need to cut the Pentagon budget. We need to cut the number of bases because each base emits a large amount of pollution. We don't need all of these bases. We have 800 bases around the world. What in the world for? We say that we wanted to end the forever wars. Biden finally got out of Afghanistan, which I'm glad he did. Though I think we also need to help the Afghan people in their hunger, because the Taliban government is certainly not acting very well in their interests. But that's a whole other chapter. But we need to stop the forever wars. We need to stop nuclear weapons, and they're both interrelated. They're both an existential threat to the people of the world.
Thank you, Ed. And let me just quickly add, unfortunately, just as the climate catastrophe is still worsening at this point, we hope to be able to reverse that. Similarly, unfortunately, the nuclear arms race has been restarted. And so we were reducing the numbers of nuclear weapons and having more and more treaties. Unfortunately, the last treaty was in 2010. It's extended now by President Biden for another 5 years, the New START treaty. But the qualitative nuclear arms race has resumed, and the countries are, including the United States, has a $2 trillion new so-called nuclear modernization program. So these existential threats are not staying pat. They're really both escalating, and we need to get to work. Now, this next question, I think is intriguing. I'll read it, and then maybe make a few comments myself, because I do have some initial thoughts on it. As important as these meetings are, I think we are mostly preaching to the choir. How can we get the message out to those who still don't see the urgency of action and responsibility? That's from Menard Cohen, and I think that's an excellent question. And I guess the one thing I wanted to contribute, at least, and maybe some of the other panelists would like to chime in, is that I think a new approach to these kinds of challenges is an intersectional approach. And that's what our No Wars, No Warming campaign is really all about. We can't remain in our silos. And there are going to be times when we all need to mobilize, when opportunities emerge, when great challenges emerge. And so, I think that, for example, when George Floyd was murdered in broad daylight by the police officer there, that was the Black Lives Matter became sort of it was at a critical point. We had to be willing to be intersectional. We couldn't just say, well, that issue doesn't apply to us. It applies to all human beings. It applies to our efforts to be a just and equal nation. And so, I think there are times when we need to do things. It doesn't mean that we need to be doing everything on all the issues. We don't have to be the point group or the point person on everything, but we need to be intersectional. Ed, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I believe that question came from Renard Cohen.
Yes.
I just want to mention, give a shout out to Renard and thank him for being here. He's actually a leader of one of our co-sponsoring groups, artistsforearth.com. And maybe we can ask him to tell us a little bit about that, because speaking of intersectional, we need to work with the arts and many other groups, of course. But if Renard, if we could unmute Renard and you could tell us just for a moment what you're up to with Artists for Earth.
Right.
Sure.
Patricia, while you're looking for him, Patricia, I see Manisha's hand. So why don't we
Yeah.
get Manisha, and then maybe you could unmute him, Patricia. Renard Cohen.
He's unmuted, everyone.
Oh, okay.
Yes, he's unmuted.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if you can see me yet, but
Yes.
Yes, we can.
okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for this program. It's great to share this information, and thanks for taking up my question about how we can reach out beyond the choir. For those who don't know what artistsforearth.com is, I implore you to go to the site. It's ARTISTS, the number 4, and then earth.com. We are a nonprofit, and what we do is we work with artists, world-class artists, award-winning artists who have donated their work to be downloaded by people who make a donation to what we're doing. When the money comes in, we get it to Maya and Green Amendments and Delaware Riverkeepers and a group called Move Past Plastics, which is great, and Food and Water Watch. So that is a way to bring artists together who are compassionate about the environmental challenges and want to see their work used in this way. We've given some checks already to these groups, and there will be more. The challenge is getting enough people to see and use the site so we can get more and more money to these groups. These groups, like Maya's group and Food and Water Watch and Move Past, they are not supported by any foundation. They don't take any money from any big groups. These folks are out there on the front lines for us, for all of us. How do you support them? Sometimes people are a little reticent to go to the website of one of these groups and say, here, let me make a donation. And the reason they're a little reticent is because they know that when they do, now they're on a mailing list, now they're going to be contacted. When you make a donation through artistsforearth.com, your information just stops there. We don't share it with anybody. And you make a donation, a small donation if you like, or a big donation. You pick a piece of art on the site and download it. And you can use it for any non-commercial purpose. So it's a kind of a sugar, a little sugar to help the medicine go down, a little beauty and a little art to inspire us during these times. And the art is world class. So I can share the screen and show it to you, but I think you can all go there. Please do. Please spread the word about this. And that way we can help Maya, and we can help Tracy Carluccio and Alex Beecham of Food and Water Watch. They just got a ban on natural gas in all new building construction starting in 2023. That's huge. 40% of all the pollution that comes out of New York is from buildings. Okay, the heating, a little bit from the stoves, but it's mostly from the heating and the, heating the building and the water.
Thank you.
So there you go. Thank you.
I do want to get to Manisha next. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Renard.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Yes, I just wanted to say that it seems like such an uphill battle to talk about how do we make a change. But just listening to Maya was so inspiring, you can see the energy and the move forward with what she's doing. And I think social media has been really good. the young, the way they are taking up this cause is really good. So we do have a lot of positive stories. I think whatever we can do individually, it's fine. But I think supporting some leaders that are doing this also is a good way to get involved. And the examples I shared, the young people, the two young people I mentioned, Ahmed and Danielle, they probably didn't even know that they were just doing their bit. They didn't know how inspiring they were and what a big change they already made, and gave an example of how to take some of this forward.
Thank you, Manisha. And I see now that there is another question that's sort of related to this involvement question, and we'll get to you in a moment, Maya. Where can those of us who have time beyond the way we run our homes? Are there second career opportunities? And so, I think that the key thing there, at least that I would start with, is get involved with an organization. It can be any of the organizations that are co-sponsoring this, but it's really important not to try to do things in isolation. The way we gather our people power together is to be involved with an organization, and then that organization in turn hopefully works intersectionally, as I just talked about a little earlier, with other organizations, and that amplifies our power. So some people do change careers, obviously, and go into the organizing world, the nonprofit sector, and so on. Actually, in my professional field of ministry, we found that a great many people now are doing that as a second or even third career. And so I'm very much in favor of people finding ways, if they have the time and the energy and the inspiration, please go for it. And be in touch with organizations that are already doing good work, and that's the best way to amplify your efforts.
Could I add one thing to that?
Well, Maya was next, and then we'll get
sorry,
to you, Ed. Yeah.
Great. So first off, I do just want to thank Renard. I'm glad he's here. Artists for Earth is amazing. And as I put in the chat, I put the link there. I have some of the art myself. It's so fantastic. It's really cool. And it's just another amazing way to support the good works of organizations. And we really appreciate Renard. And thank you. I wanted to speak to the issue about getting to alternative or other audiences, because that's really important. That is one of the valuable things about a Green Amendment. First off, when you have a constitutional right, this is something that will ultimately go before the people. And so your organizing and your outreach throughout the entire process needs to include community engagement, like writ large, right? It's not just one local community or another, it's everybody. And, clean water, the ability to get healthy water out of your faucet is not a partisan issue. PFAS has hit every political party. And when it hits a community, they're pissed, right? There are farmers who have lost their farms, who have lost their livelihoods because of contaminated water that's like decimating their dairy herds and their soils, right? There are so many different versions of that, where people of all political stripes are being impacted. The key is to find those impacts, and then in terms of the Green Amendment, go in and speak with them about their experience and how the Green Amendment helps address that experience. And because the Green Amendment is about the environmental rights of all people and is so overarching, there is a way to engage everybody. Yes, the industrial operators, they will hate on you. They're not going to come around no matter how much they tell you they love their kids. I can't imagine they love their kids with what they're doing to them by virtue of their fossil fuel industry. But you will have those people. But there are many, many people who have been impacted by pollution and degradation. And when they hear this idea that, look, we just want to give you a right to that so you can hold your government accountable for their contribution to that mess, they open their ears. In terms of second careers, I do just want to offer that there is a place and space for everybody, for every single talent in environmental activism. Volunteerism is superb because nonprofits don't have much money, but not everybody, right, can volunteer. Like, we all need income. And so a second career path is also incredibly helpful. If you take your life experience in whatever field you've been working and you're willing to come to a nonprofit for a significantly lesser salary, please don't come to me, respond to a job thing that I have up and expect me, when I'm saying I'm advertising $50,000, you're expecting $100,000. Don't even bother to waste my time. Not that I wouldn't love to give you that. I can't give you that, right? So, but if you're willing to accept a lesser income and take your life experience and your talents and put them to work for the earth, look for those job opportunities. There are lots of them. And apply, and then go in and explain to that organization what you know about them, why you care about what they're doing, and how your experience out of the nonprofit world gives you a leg up, because you know so much more than perhaps some of the younger applicants that might be coming in the door, because we need the benefit of experience, but we also do need you to understand you're not going to get paid as much and you're not going to get as good benefits and all that stuff. But we value you if you're able to do it.
Okay, we've got two final questions, and Ed, one of them is for you. So I know your hand was already up, but what we really want you to try to address is the question, what does the Civilian Climate Corps do?
Okay, I'm glad you asked, because that's what I wanted to follow up with Maya on, because she was talking about second careers, which I was going to mention also, but the Civilian Climate Corps, I would say, provides opportunities for youth for first careers in the environment, okay? Just the history of that is that in the 1930s, the original Civilian Conservation Corps basically worked in rural areas and forests. The new CCC that people like Bob Casey and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ed Markey are supporting is much broader than that. It includes that, but it also has training and work in urban and suburban areas, to restore the environment, to get rid of the lead pipes, to work on electrification and broadband and all kinds of things in rural areas. It can actually be a tremendous training ground for young people. And when you have disadvantaged young people who are coming out of high school and don't really have a lot of opportunities in their communities because they're living in a poor community, this can provide a way not only to help the environment, not only to help your own community, but to develop a strong career path. And as I say, these are going to be union jobs. They're going to start at $15 an hour or more, and go up from there. So I think that's a great opportunity for a first career.
Thanks, Ed. Now our last question is from a high school teacher. Do any of the speakers have climate policy related organizations that are focused on schools and higher ed policy changes? Institutions. I'm not quite sure what the wording of that last one, but does any panelist want to pick up on that question? Any things that are focused on secondary schools and colleges, in other words?
So I think United Nations of Greater Philadelphia, we do work a lot with schools and university students. Also in the past, we have worked and collaborated with UPenn and universities and other local partners to think of ways of reducing some of this, how it can be done through a policy change, how it can be done through various other measures. So we do have a lot of those discussions, and we do share it with the city and also with the university. So that is the only bit that we have done.
Thank you. And I think that's actually, and the website for United Nations Association of Greater Philadelphia is in the chat. So take a look at that if you want to pick up on what Manisha just said. And at this point, let me offer my deep gratitude for the panel and for the speakers and for the questions. I think all of this has been excellent. And I want to turn it over now to Mary Day Kent for a closing remarks.
Well, I'll be very brief because I think we're heading out the door, the Zoom door. I am so appreciative of the fact that so many people joined us, that you stayed the whole time. And I am very grateful to our panelists, because I will admit that with the subject that we chose, I was fearing that finding positive handles and a toolkit of response was asking an awful lot. But I think we did it, and we have a lot of new ideas, ideas that are new to me, handles that we can move forward on. And I really look forward to seeing some of us at events and projects in the next months, and perhaps this next year after COP27, we'll have a new set of handles. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And yes, let's show again our appreciation
Thank
for
you.
all the speakers and for all of the excellent questions. This was an excellent question and answer period as well, I think. So we wish you a wonderful rest of your day, and be involved with one or more of the organizations that co-sponsored this as we carry this important work forward. Take care, have
Thank
a
you.
blessed rest of your day, and see
Thanks,
you again
everybody.
soon.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Thank you, Patricia.